Imagine a town so afraid that it stops asking questions. A place where grief turns into rage, and rage needs someone to blame. This isn't a story about evidence first. It's a story about fear, and how 3 teenagers became symbols of evil before they ever stood trial. Stay with me, because once this narrative started, there was no stopping it. In 1993, West Memphis, Arkansas was the kind of place where everyone knew each other. Conservative, religious, quiet. A town that believed it understood right and wrong clearly. Until one afternoon, 3 8-year-old boys vanished. By the next day, their bodies were found in a muddy drainage ditch. The crime scene was horrifying. The community was shattered. Parents panicked. Churches filled. Rumors spread faster than facts. The town didn't just want answers. It wanted justice immediately. Police were under immense pressure. They had no clear suspect, no solid forensic evidence, no experienced homicide unit. But they had something else, a theory. That theory focused on Damien Echols. Damien was 18. He wore black. Listened to heavy metal. Read books about the occult. Didn't fit in. In a deeply religious town, that was enough. People already whispered about him. Said he was dangerous. Said he talked about dark things. When fear looks for a face, it chooses the one that stands out. Damien wasn't alone. 2 other boys, Jason Baldwin and Jesse Miscali, were pulled into the investigation. Teenagers with no history of violence and no connection to the victims. But once their names were spoken, the story locked into place. 3 boys. 3 victims. A satanic explanation that made people feel safer. Because monsters are easier to understand than randomness. The public was convinced almost immediately. Talk shows speculated. News headlines hinted at ritual murder. The town stopped asking if they did it and started asking how. That was the most dangerous moment of all. Because once guilt feels certain, evidence becomes optional. Once the theory was in place, police didn't search for suspects anymore. They searched for confirmation. And the easiest place to find it was Jesse Miscali. Jesse was younger than the others. He had a low IQ. He trusted authority. He was questioned for hours without a lawyer, without his parents, without protection. Under that pressure, something predictable happened. Jesse confessed, or at least said what investigators wanted to hear. The details were wrong. The timeline didn't match reality. Basic facts were incorrect. But the confession existed. And once it did, everything changed. Instead of questioning the reliability of the confession, police treated it as the missing piece. They ignored inconsistencies and adjusted their theory to fit what Jesse said. Because now they had what the public wanted, a confession. Damien and Jason were arrested shortly after. There was no physical evidence tying them to the crime. No DNA. No fingerprints. No eyewitnesses. But none of that mattered anymore. The case had a narrative, and the town embraced it. When the case reached the courtroom, it didn't feel like a search for truth. It felt like a performance. The prosecution didn't rely on hard evidence, because there wasn't any. Instead, they leaned into fear, belief, and image. Damien Echols was presented not as a person, but as an idea, an outsider, a threat, a symbol of evil. Expert witnesses spoke about occult symbols and satanic rituals despite having no physical proof. Music choices, clothing, and book preferences were treated as evidence of murder. Being different was treated as guilt. Jesse Miscali's confession was played for the jury, even though it contradicted itself and didn't match the crime scene. Key context was omitted. Jason Baldwin sat quietly, connected to the case simply because he knew Damien. There was no motive that made sense, no clear timeline, no explanation that held together. But fear doesn't need logic. The jury didn't deliberate for long. Jesse Miscali was sentenced to life plus additional years. Jason Baldwin received life in prison. Damien Echols was sentenced to death. 3 teenagers were erased from normal life in a matter of hours. Outside the courtroom, the town felt relieved. They believed the danger was gone. But the truth hadn't even been touched yet. Prison didn't end the story. It exposed the cracks. As years passed, journalists, lawyers, and independent investigators took a closer look. There was still no physical evidence. No DNA linking any of them to the crime. No murder weapon. No credible eyewitnesses. Yet 3 men were imprisoned, 1 awaiting execution. Jesse Miskelly's confession was re-examined. Experts showed how easily it could have been influenced, how details were fed to him, how mistakes were corrected mid-statement, and how the jury never heard the full recording. It wasn't proof. It was pressure. Then forensic science evolved. New DNA testing excluded Damien, Jason, and Jesse. Some evidence pointed toward unknown individuals who were never properly investigated. Support grew. Musicians, actors, writers, and legal experts all asked the same question: how could this conviction still stand? Documentaries brought global attention. Doubt spread. And the closer the truth came, the more resistance it faced. Admitting error wouldn't just free 3 men. It would expose how fear and pressure overrode justice. After nearly 2 decades, the pressure became impossible to ignore. In 2011, Damien Eccles, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miskelly were released under an Alford plea. They were free, but not declared innocent. They maintained their innocence while legally acknowledging the state claimed it had enough evidence to convict. It was a legal exit without accountability. Freedom came with a cost. Years of life were gone. Childhoods erased. Trauma carried into adulthood. They walked into a world that had already decided who they were. For the victims' families, closure remained incomplete. The case became a symbol of how fear shapes investigations, how moral panic replaces evidence, how being different can be mistaken for being dangerous, and how hard it is for a system to admit it was wrong. So here's the final question. Is freedom enough when innocence is never officially acknowledged? Because true crime isn't just about who committed the crime. It's about what happens when fear decides the answer before the truth is known.